Mr. Speaker, when we took the suspension, I was going on to the area and to where the government is saying they're going to intervene if necessary to improve the competitiveness of markets, starting with fuel. I have been crying for that a long time. I believe that um, for quite some time we have been on that issue and no one has taken up the fight to bring down fuel costs in this country, other than the diesel that produces electricity. Gasoline is really outrageous, and by virtue of our proximity to America, everybody recognizes that it's so low there and questions why it is not more reasonable here in the Cayman Islands. And I do know that we have to import it, we have to import everything, but there are many times that I have stood on the floor of this honorable house and made suggestions. I hope the government does intervene. I think past administrations have all been fearful of the response from the suppliers. And I have suggested ways that we can alleviate those problems too. We ain't gonna run out of fuel immediately. We can always hire someone else to bring it in and supply the country in the interim. But it needs to be done. Fuel prices are based on Platt. That's how they're bought. But these people are buying it in one country with their company in that country and selling it to another country that is selling it to us. And that, so they're triple dipping us when we need to look directly at the source, at the origin of that fuel and the price there and the transportation directly to us. I mean, it's really hurtful to see that when you remove the duties of the diesel to CUC, what the price really is. And with profits included. But nevertheless, at the gas stations, it is $2-3 more. It's ridiculous. And there are ways of doing it. We just need to monitor it and bring people to the table and let them know we're monitoring it. And it's an easy process. Everybody talks about how complicated it is. I want an original invoice from the source. You compare that with Platt prices of that day. And if that's not what they bought it at, then they can't be buying it higher. And if they're buying it at that, they need to justify the price they're selling it, retailing it for. And we need to get them out of the retail business. You can't be fish and fowl at the same time. And then they have these C-stores that they're making a killing on as well. I am not bold enough to, as some people try to calculate how much profit they're making. But I can tell you, it is much more than we can think of. It has to be. if you're buying fuel down the Gulf states and bringing it to Cayman and selling it 4 times what it's being sold retail in America, something is radically wrong with that. I said already, there are countries in the Caribbean that put a certain amount on fuel that the suppliers can make a certain, I think in one country there's 25 cents, Bahamas, and then the retailer can make 35. So what's that? That's 60 cents. In addition to what the duties are. On top of what they pay for it and transport it. It's ridiculous. We have to have the political will to protect our people. Mind you, nobody seems to be slowing down from buying it because there are so many cars on the road. But that's beside this point. Our economy stutters at times from the high cost of fuel because it affects deliveries and the cost of food. When those deliveries have to be made by vehicle, we don't have trains. The people on the eastern end of the island, the price for food is, I'll bet you, 40 to 50% more than it is in Georgetown. Just like Cayman Brack. Well, you don't go in one MC stores up there. That is convenience store, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Because of the cost to get it there. Everything it has a delivered cost tagged onto it because of fuel. And of course, wear and tear on their vehicles, but yeah. I noted that the Browns have just taken over the gas station in East End, and they're planning on doing some renovations to try and enhance the service because there was only one grade of fuel, gasoline, that could be bought, which was 93. So they're going now to put in 87. 8 and 9? Okay, 8 and 9. And Mr. Speaker, we need, and I think the government needs to work on this as fast as possible. Mr. Speaker, let me move on now to the achieving full employment jobs for all Caymanians. I am glad to note that the government has recognized that work permits are one of the stumbling blocks in Caymanians being treated fairly, and the lack of jobs for Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, I saw in the papers where Deloitte, I believe, was doing a survey among businesses as to their problems, the problems experienced in getting service from the Immigration Department. I think we have talked long enough about this human resource department where we separate border control. And I think a lot of people believe that border control means around the island. Border control means all the imports, the ports, the airport, wherever there is movement of people into the country. That's what immigration is all about. You know, the premier said that they're going to enhance the police. I will touch on that briefly a little later on. But, Mr. Speaker, we are, for a long time, we have used the immigration department to get away from making hard decisions in this country as to how Caymanians survive, i.e., getting jobs. We need this department where it is separated from immigration and it concentrates wholly and solely on labor, human resources. It's not the job of immigration department. It worked for a while and it's now time to move on. I wish the Premier Godspeed with that. But it is necessary, absolutely necessary. And the finer details of it should also include that when they're going to interview, someone from that department should be in the interviews. Because too many complaints we have heard of people applying for jobs, and as soon as they find out that they're Caymanians, they don't give them the jobs. Mr. Speaker, I have a friend from East End who's a very good friend of yourself. And you will know who I'm talking about, who has spent 40 years nearly in the industry, the tourism industry. Assistant managers all over the place, all over Florida. He worked for government at the time up there in tourism. He also keeps an apartment in Miami when he can afford it because he's Caymanian, he's out of a job. And he applied for an assistant manager's job at a hotel here recently from his Miami address. After trying numerous times to get a job here. He was called for an interview. And within 5 minutes of him walking into that interview, it deteriorated because they found out he was Caymanian. Now, I can't say what kind of job he does whilst he's on the job. But this is what they do us. And if we do not find someone who has the wherewithal to deal with labor, the human resources department, it's going to all be for naught. There must be no political interference. I'm sick of writing recommendations for people that I know are capable of doing the job. And they have nothing. Mr. Speaker, that's why I said on the 31st of May, the government needs to step up now. They need to put their foot down. We need to change the status quo. I can't advocate for someone who is not qualified to do a job, a particular job, nor can I advocate for someone who gets the job and doesn't come to work the next day. There are those that do that too. But don't come back to me the next day next week and say that you can't get a job because you didn't go to it, or you couldn't keep the job. But there are many Caymanians. At the end of the last session of this legislature, before it was dissolved, the previous legislature, before it was dissolved, there were over 100 Caymanians with post-secondary education. I wonder how many it is now. In their country, I hope the Premier has the fortitude now, in the evening of his political career, to take this thing on. You speak for yourself. I go on before you. You see how he starts on me? Wait, yeah. God forbid that the two of us leave in here at the same time. That's probably true. I can't make it without him, Mr. Speaker. It's probably true. But I do better when he's not around. So I invite him to take his leave anytime he's ready. Mr. Speaker, the last administration is responsible for what I'm about to say now. That pension thing, and we know where we changed up the pension provision, and it was delayed for implementation. That now has overwhelmed the Immigration Department with work permits, because everybody wants to meet that 31st of December deadline so they can get their pension. Now that is absolute abuse of this system. But I blame the government, and in particular the advice of the Attorney General, for these provisions in our laws about certain areas can go in at, and certain sections can be gazetted at different times. Do it all when we do it here, and it's over. But, Mr. Speaker, they say I can't blame the AG because the House resolves to do what it pleases. And I understand that. But the two of you can see black and blue on an AC. Mr. Speaker, the government should never have done that. I know we cannot anticipate, but a member is bringing a motion to try and get something out of it. But what I would encourage the government also to do is to flag those individuals that we know are just leaving for that purpose, to get their pension, and put a persona non grata upon their names. Yeah, they can't get it for 2 years, but after 2 years they'll want to come back.
Can I remind you that there is a motion, and I would ask you not to go too far into the discussion on it at this point in time.
But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going in no motion.
You're discussing what is subject matter before us in a motion. Yes, you are. So I'm asking you to move on from that.
Mr. Speaker, that motion does not talk about declaring people persona non grata. It doesn't, sir. Not the one that I'm aware of.
You don't know what the member is going to say. The matter is before the assembly. Please move on from there, because you don't know what he's going to say tomorrow, and that's why they have anticipation, because you don't know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, pardon my ignorance. I shall bow to your ruling, but my understanding of those things are that I cannot anticipate the motion, but I don't know what people are going to say. I can say what I want to say. What they say after at the motion time, then it's entirely up to them. But I shall bow to your ruling. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to touch on these observers, the election observers, and their report on who should be enfranchisement should be extended to, because I hope it's not work permit holders that they're talking about. Mr. Speaker, may I draw your attention to B on the broad outcome 2. Increase the transparency and fairness of the work permit and immigration system. I merely touched on what the observers said about enfranchisement to vote. And I said, I hope it's not work permit holders that they're talking about. Mr. Speaker, we have all been here quite some time. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to education. Mr. Speaker, I support the other members who, from this side, who has said that they believe that education should have priority in this country. For too long, we have paid lip service to it. I believe it's during the last legislature, I encouraged the minister on the first day to build that John Gray High School. Because whatever could be said has been said about that school. And it needs to be built. If nothing else happens, that needs to be completed now. It has stood there since 2008. We're 9 years hence, and nothing has been done on it. Oh, just finish the hall. That's the hall. I'm talking about the school. I don't know. But I know what, Mr. Speaker, that has stood there for too long as some monstrosity, as a monument to the failures of the first PPM government, or some white animal. I don't know what kind of animal it is, but some kind of animal. That's my government, of course. But we all have failings, don't we? Yeah. You don't like to hear the truth about them? Hope they make it kinder and gentler. Mr. Speaker, I recently made a presentation to government about the areas of needs in my constituency. And I did say that I was I was approaching this cabinet with a healthy dose of apprehension, as the last one didn't do too much. So I'm waiting and hoping that this one will be a little kind and gentler to the people of East End. Mr. Speaker, I hope the new education minister reads my presentation and with some degree of looking kindness to the wishes and the needs of that school under this plan. Because it appears like, because the school is so far away from Georgetown, that there has been a degree of neglect, because it has struggled. Every time it reaches a point where you can see some success, they remove the people who are already comfortable there. A case in point this time, they just up and move the counselor, who was just getting comfortable with the children. I don't know why they do it. I certainly don't want to say it's because of me. I hope not. I would like to think not. Mr. Speaker, I hear the government say that they're going to build new schools in Bodden Town, upgrade schools in Savannah and the likes. I also suggested that the school needs then be upgraded or moved. I was not overly excited about joining East End and Northside School, but I believe, this is years ago, but I believe I've come to the point where I believe it needs to be looked at comprehensively, because the schools are small number. And we can have the possibility of having Clifton Hunter and a purpose-built primary school across the street or somewhere in that close vicinity. If those schools are to remain in the districts that makes them so unique, then, including the north side one, they have outlived the properties that they're on. They don't have any modern facilities. There's no space for expansions and what have you. There is property right up the road that I believe would be, the neighbors would be amenable to having the school built at, and it's adjoining the Donovan Rankin play field, which we wouldn't have to go back over that. But something needs to happen to the schools. It's the environment that school children are in that makes them learn, I believe. I'm no educator. The minister's an former educator, or still is. But it's the environment. It don't have to be. There are many places in the world that they don't have air conditioning, they don't do this, they don't do that, and they still learn. But it's a holistic environment. The minister spoke of increasing the pay for teachers. I support that, always have. But I believe it runs much deeper than that. Because there are many teachers who joined the public system and has since left for less pay, and they are more successful in turning out more educated children in this country. it tells me that the environment they're working in is not conducive to teaching nor learning. That's what I encourage the minister to look at in tandem with increase in pay. I believe there needs to be a little more devolution of authority. Something needs to happen. Because much of what I know comes second, third, and fourth hand. So I will not delve into that. But I believe it needs to be looked at properly. That's what's causing our children, our teachers to get frustrated. They wouldn't have gone into teaching if they didn't love children and love to teach. They don't have to be millionaires. They just need to impart their knowledge. But they need to do it in an environment where they're not pressured. And there's so many rumors of that. Mr. Speaker, at Clifton Hunter High School, I support him. But I believe a lot of the services that is needed, like for special needs children, special education need, it needs to be enhanced. I have a little friend who I believe has been, our relationship has been more like father and son. He's only 13, 14. But he fell through the crack because of the lack of special educational needs teachers. And I believe too much of that is happening. Teachers are getting frustrated. They cannot deal with all of the special needs. They cannot. We need intervention and separation until we can get those kids back where they need to be in the mainstream of teaching. But we just allow it to happen. And then that's just one off the list. As much, the leader of the opposition spoke of being at Clifton Hunter at the last graduation. So was I. There are kids coming out there that go and do whatever they want to do in whatever Ivy League school they want to go to. But there are others who were not given the opportunity, and we have done nothing about that. Absolutely nothing. Mr. Speaker, I'm not altogether blaming the ministers of past ministers, because I know they have a passion for it as well. I know my good friend, the premier, when he was there, he got so frustrated that he couldn't catch his breath at times because of the lack of his vision failing, because he couldn't get anything done. And I'm sure the others have as well. If we do not intervene now, the crack is going to widen. And all we have done here would be for naught. It needs intervention. It needs serious intervention. Too many people come to this country and call us stupid. Someone needs to now pay. Be that me or many others. We need to change it. We need education to be priority. Those who can't negotiate around the potholes will have to fall into them with their cars. If that's what it takes, do it now. The Premier said this country has a good opportunity here now. This is our opportunity. Stop worrying about the building of roads. Yes, we want to see the roads. If I had a choice to stay in traffic for an hour and a half or educate the children of this country, I'm going to take the latter. It is time. We love to beat up our public school system, and there are very few in here that did not go to it. And we have neglected it. Maybe the minister from Cayman didn't go. He grew up in America. Every other one of us went to the public system in this country. And we are not prepared to make the sacrifices. The Premier talked of the sacrifices his last administration made to get us into financial compliance. Now, let the next administration, be that with you, Mr. Premier, or without you and I, talk about the sacrifices made to kick our education off. Doc, can't get it. Upgrade the launches. Dump, get a new method. Let's do what we have to do. It is time. Somebody needs to start. I give the Premier and the Minister of Education my absolute commitment to make the sacrifices necessary to ensure it gets done. The last administration couldn't do it because they were more about finances. That is over. Let's now put our backs to this wheel and get it done. There's not one person in here who are not prepared to do that. He who is not prepared to make the necessary sacrifices for the education of our children must now hold their hands up. I want to. That's our pointing at you. Madam Speaker, I encourage the Minister to go at that with absolute vigor. Let's do it. See the Minister for Finance, won't be compliant next year. Well, let's not be compliant this year. If we are going to do it for education. Mr. Speaker, let me turn, because I know the Premier got soon start one go home and them kind of thing. So let me turn to the crime and fear of crime, reducing crime and the fear of crime. Mr. Speaker, I was talking to my brother a few days ago, and he was congratulating this new commissioner because he said that he had seen an increase in police vehicles on the road. Crime seems to have been settling down a little bit. Of course, we always have some stupid person on the road. But by and large, it appears like this commissioner has some kind of plan. It's not for me to determine that. I hope it is so. But I approach that with a healthy dose of cautious optimism as well. And I am prepared, Mr. Speaker, ever since being here. You know I've always been prepared to support the police department, but you know I'll bring motion and no confidence on them too. So when the time comes, that's necessary, that will happen too, if the job is not being done. I encourage the government to give what is necessary to get the job done. The Premier says that he had to cut back on that. He did 25 officers per year for the next 3 years. Whatever it takes, let's try to get the police department with as much tools as we possibly can. Because when you do not give a man a tool, you cannot expect him to get the job done. But when you give him the tools and the job does not get done, then it's time to fire him. That's how I think that's management 101. You do it or you leave. Or let everybody in here vote on whether you have confidence in them any longer. That's what Parliament is for. Mr. Speaker, the Premier is saying that the government is saying they're going to reform the Marine Unit as part of an approach to border security. I'm sure the member from Savannah, the Premier, and the Attorney General are the only ones here that served in cabinet with me. I'm sure they will remember how that border patrol equipment came into being. It was on a motion on a paper presented to cabinet from me. Mr. Speaker, at the time, the objective was the same thing, to form a mini Coast Guard. But of course, that little fella that had to look up to tie his shoestring, who was governor at the time, did not want volunteers anywhere near our police force. If there was ever anyone who came here that was not fit for purpose, it was him. Mr. Speaker, I also said since then that we were duped. The Premier and I were duped into that helicopter we got. That wasn't fit for purpose either. What we wanted it to do, which was long hauls of patrol to Cayman and around the place. I guess we made some mistakes then too. It's time to correct that. I I don't, I don't know if I heard on the news, but something tells me I heard on the news that an illegal person was apprehended a few nights ago and is wanted for murder in Jamaica. Really? In our little country? And it was an illegal one. Now, you know he didn't come through customs at the dock or immigration at the airport. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, maybe we need to go back to 2005. For those who don't know, the Premier will remember, and my good friend, the member from Savannah will remember, the reason we implemented the visa system, it was the same reason. We had found so many deportees in this country that we had to do something. Nobody wants to talk about that. These people are not coming for any goodwill in our country. Philanthropists. Unless it is for their own good. Mr. Speaker, I know we need to try to stop it somehow. The member from Prospect was inviting me to go fishing one night. No, Bobo. Fearful of going fishing at nights nowadays. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to upgrade our helicopter to a bigger one, more range, more capabilities, which we anticipated we were going to get in 2007, 6, 7, 8. Like lift and the likes, only to find out that it couldn't work on her. Oh, the commissioner too. He gave us a line. Why name? Well, the only thing that sure Jack ever did good was fire him. But Mr. Speaker, that helicopter needs to be upgraded now too. More capable helicopter. And if it's necessary to enhance that, we may need a fixed wing plane to stretch it out more. I see where the UK is assisting us with some stuff, which I will not go into. But that needs to happen. One of the things I haven't seen the government committing to is electronic ticketing in this country. Mr. Speaker, I don't know where the bad driving and the bad behavior has come from. It had to be imported. And I wonder if I'm the only one driving on the road. I'm the only one seeing it. Because could never be the police see it and they do nothing about it. Mr. Speaker, I brought a motion to this honorable House asking to increase penalties for vehicles driving through the school zone when the lights are flashing. The last minister did nothing about it. You know, I know people don't like the truth when it's told about them, you know. Mr. Speaker, especially those schools that are on the eastern end of that. That's the ones that I drive across most when the lights are flashing. It is ridiculous what these people do. And I try to stay right in the middle, right on that middle line, and every time I see them coming, I go to the, every time they try pass me, I go to Mr. Speaker, we got to kill our children. Mr. Speaker, we need to remember that right there at Savannah, we almost lost 2 children. I witnessed 2 cars coming down. I'm coming out of my road, which is right in the school zone, the road to my house. And a lady, looked like a helper maybe, picking up the kids, I don't know, 5, 6. And she was holding them by their hands. And it's a good thing she stopped on the line that divides the 2 lanes. And 2 cars went by her just as fast as that. Woof! I was so frightened I couldn't even get out of my road to chase them. That's what's going to happen there. We need to put serious penalties in place. If you found driving through a school zone when the lights are flashing, it's $500 on the first offense. Speeding over 15, $500 on the first offense, $1,000 on the second offense, and your license taken away for a year on the third offense. And we need to improve our camera system to allow license plate recognition for ticketing. Because that set of cameras that were put in place, if you were up against that, you couldn't see you. We need, and Mr. Speaker, to think. Mr. Speaker, I can show how effective cameras are. Mr. Speaker, you have been to England more than anybody in here, all us put together. Mr. Speaker, those terrorists recently that stabbed up the people in the marketplace, within 8 minutes, they were apprehended. Within 8 minutes. You think they had a buzzer on there? Or a cowbell? No, they didn't. Cameras. If you don't want Big Brother to be watching you, don't do anything out of the way in public places. That's where we need to reach now. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that we in this country has to put mechanisms in place to control behavior. You see all the road up there by Jose? All them dividers they put in there because people going all over the place. Making 5, 6 lanes. Out of 2. This is what is happening. And if we don't curb this lack of rule of law from the beginning, we are going to be lost. It needs to stop now. Why do we need to put up all these things up there? No courtesan driving in this country. And it is alien to the Caymanian people. Mr. Speaker, I tried introducing the Minister of Education, brought the traffic law. Before I left, she just carried on after I got there. Before I left, well, I carried on some of hers before when I got there as well. She brought it after I demitted office. And to get these people sit there driving tests. Mr. Speaker, I have never in my life seen worse drivers. Some people with the short people. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just trying not want to call the nationality. That's all. Whew. I've never seen the grip on the wheel like that. You can see them shaking. They're so frightened when they drive. Mr. Speaker, I don't know who is licensing these people, but we need to make sure that they understand what they're doing, because they're all over the road. Very few even understand how to drive around the roundabouts. That's the education that the street skills needs to do. Educate people on how to go around those roundabouts. And most importantly, we need to deal something with that public transport unit. Because I hate to be the prophet of doom, Mr. Speaker, but God forbid we have an accident in one of these days. Because they pull out in front of you, they park right in the lane, they park across with the lane. I saw two a few days ago. I'm going to East End, and they stop right up High Rock, right in the middle of the lane, talk to each other, and the shoulders, they're wide as it can be, but they park in the middle of that lane. If you say anything, then you're going to be vilified right there. You're likely to get 2x4 across your head. Mr. Speaker, government needs to put electronic ticketing in place. I hate that we have had to come to this because of the lack of a traffic department to a great extent. But this is what has to happen. It'll pay for itself. But we need, if the Premier needs to bring in those people from England that put all the cameras up in England, bring them in. But God forbid, don't get the one that did that, the other one. No, Bobo. Something wrong with them cameras? Oh. Mr. Speaker, Premier want me go. I got to leave him alone now. Mr. Speaker, a couple other areas I want to touch on. I was a little surprised. The affordable health care, under the affordable health care, he spoke about up at Shetty and not being able to access that health care up there. All you got to do is change some of them up hospital. That's all you need to do. Madam Mr. Speaker, we've been talking about this from the day Jane Thompson come look for us. This is 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Where the agreement was, as I remember, Mr. Speaker, you may want to intervene here, that if there was suspect of cardiac problems in Buntown, East End, outside, they would go straight to Shetty in the ambulance. We now got to drop on Georgetown and then figure out what is. Mine already diagnosed it from the time they pick them up. And drop on Georgetown, then, well, on second thoughts, let's call Lon and see if he got to pay for it. Someone's life is at stake. And Mr. Speaker, yes, 2 out of every 10 may not be cardiac problem. May just been gasping or something. Are we prepared to take that chance? Really? You talk about money after, you know. Anyway, I wish the new minister there from Baden Town East, good luck. You got to fix it. Good. Not all of it. Oh, no, you got to shoot for the stars. Drop on the moon. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I must register my disappointment in the Premier. He wants me to say again, Mr. Speaker, this first time. During the last administration, there was much talk about mental health facility. Suffice it to say, all that time the Premier was thinking about East End. When I gave the Minister for Lands a request by 30-some farmers to get a piece of land up in East End subdivided. This Minister for Education started that before I went there, and then I continued it. I was somewhat shocked to wake up to the 7 o'clock news that's where the facility is going a few weeks ago. I view that as a lack of respect, not only for me, but for the people of East End. I would never do it. Someone needs to get their priorities right or stop playing politics. Okay? Because those who like to play politics, I can play it too. I've told you all, I've said, Mr. Speaker, already, that this is the house of politics. Churches are for praying. We can go there afterwards. I ain't threatening nobody. Need to have more respect for the people of this country. You shaking? You're not shaking, yeah? Mr. Speaker, I then learned that the minister visited my clinic with all his entourage, and I was not even notified, much less invited. To some extent, I don't believe it's his fault in either of those two cases. People love play politics. Tell them to create what I did in 92, a soapbox. If that's what they want to do, take me on out in the arena. Not here. Until you have gone through that war of trying to get in here, don't take me on, because I'll embarrass you. I am here representing the people of East End, in particular, and the people of this country in general. And I didn't sign on as no preacher, so my mouth never joined no church. I came in here as a politician, and I expect the respect that those people up there are due. Especially from the civil service. Especially from them. If it happens again, I know what I'm going to do. Mr. Speaker, you will have to decide on that one. It's wrong. Mr. Speaker, that clinic has been in the state of disrepair for years. I have worked with HSA for years trying to get it done. Up to yesterday, the parking lot had a hole in it for 4 years. They eventually fixed that around the drain. And now you got your drop water to fall, you stand settling right. We were supposed to put a foil to, for the, to when people come in out of the rain, they want drive, take it into the. You know how long that been in the plan? You know how long that been in the plan, Mr. Speaker? The building is deteriorating. Let me get there. No, and then when I speak up, the Little McLaughlin Healthcare Center needs repairs to the entrance for the entire facility. In 2014, the minister and I toured the facility and identified a number of needed upgrades, such as a reconfiguration of the entrance. I have subsequently toured with the staff of the HSA and requested handicap parking closer to the entrance. To date, I have not seen any movement on the maintenance or upgrades. It is now urgent that these matters be addressed. 2014 was the last minister visit. Really? Is it because he's sent too far away? Or is it because they're trying to punish me because I'm a part of the government? It's sad is the day when the people of this country are not given their due respect because their representative is not a part of the government. Sad is the day. Hot here. Oh, Chris. Mr. Speaker, we need to correct those things with Shetty because many of our people are losing out on proper health care because of some little pettiness between the HSA and Shetty. That's what's causing it. And my people are suffering more than anyone else. By having go down, and then go up, and then go around like a merry-go-round. Some little petty foolishness. What I forgot, the purpose of going into medicine, it was about saving lives. That's what it was. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, don't make me, I'm not going no more on that, so I can release the premier. Mr. Speaker, they say on the stronger communities and support for the most vulnerable. Wow. Implement the immediate priorities of the older person's policy. Mr. Speaker, when that was brought here, I said that it wasn't what the paper was written on. I hope the Premier, who for this now, Premier? I hope the Premier can change it now. Because all I am seeing them asking for is for registering people over 65. There are things that needs to be put in there, like in other countries. Over 65, the license for your car is only 25% of what it was. No duties on importation, that kind of stuff. Special lines in government, set the example. No one is looking at this. Set the example. Older persons deserve that. Secret. Hopefully we'll get there one day. Hopefully. But if we don't treat them good, I don't think we'll get there. That's the kind of stuff that is needed. And then private sector will follow. And our older persons will be better off. But we collecting the name, registration, and file. We giving them something. We're not giving them anything. The medication at government cut in half or something. Those are the little things that government can do to enhance our people's lives. It wasn't what the paper that brought it down here under. On. Mr. Speaker, I see where they're going to reform the social assistance program and agencies delivering them to ensure the right people get the right help at the right time. Yeah, I welcome that. Because NAU has been on the staff from its creation. And don't look like anybody want to put in a staff there. But I understand they're amalgamating them now too. If I think it bad, no. Do that. It was washer before. When it was under, at the time was called social services, it was worse. Now we're going to put this back under family services? Really? I wouldn't recommend that one. Those two should stand alone, Mr. Speaker. Properly resource NAU, and it will get the job done. You got young, progressive Caymanians in there who knows how to get the job done. Just properly resource it. Mr. Speaker, as I recall last Finance Committee, it must have been 26 or something like that. They said they needed. I wonder how many. Well, they said to be full of how they needed 20 something, but they gave them, they would do it 9, they gave them 5, and they still haven't recruited them. This is over a year ago. Waiting on consultant report. You don't know that you need more staff if people are overworked. You know, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch briefly on this beach access and stuff. Mr. Speaker, I see where the government wants to continue to ensure that beach access is maintained. Continue to ensure that? They were never established. And if we continue it, I want to encourage it, but that is a serious matter, not only for Caymanians, for all. Roy Bodden thing, all in sundry. Mr. Speaker, we can. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the under accountable government, the district council in each district. And I go no more on the district, on the access, Mr. Speaker, because I know I got a question in on that, you know. Oh, I just remind you, I should never have said so. The district council, because we need to get these things established. With no disrespect, I didn't support the law when it was brought here and the way it was structured, and I don't support it now. And I welcome the opportunity for us to sit down and see if we can we can restructure this and have a more a law that is more conducive to transparency. Can't have cabinet appoint nearby on the board, and the representative only got one. No, man, no. I think it'll work. I favor public election of councils. I don't know if we can get into local government. That carries it to a different level. But the election process, whether it's midterm or every 4 years or at general elections, I support that. I've always supported that. So has the Premier supported those kind of moves. Before, he may have changed his mind. Unelected. But you're not going to worry about it. Mr. Speaker, you mean tell me you got to turn Venezuela on that? Try change constitution? Oh, no, you won't. Mr. Speaker, one of the things I didn't hear in the SPS was Mr. Speaker, one of the things I didn't hear, and maybe I shouldn't have expected it, was the legislative agenda for the next year. And maybe that'll come. It usually comes during the throne speech and the budget. But certainly, I hope that this government considers seriously bringing a reform to the election law. That is really needed now. We really need to reform the election law. And it might not be for us. We may be all gone, but we all know it's necessary to do that. I don't know who the observers saw when they were here. I didn't have an interview with them. I didn't see them these then. They must have come in under the cover of night, because I had much to talk to them about. But I guess I went and asked them at the office to have an interview with them, so they made sure I didn't get it, which is fine. But we need to prepare the next generation for a smoother transition through the election process. The election law is outdated. All this foolishness about, not foolishness, but all these provisions, Mr. Speaker, about registration every 3 months.
Sorry to interrupt you, but would you get back to the SPS? I don't know.
Mr. Speaker, I'm saying one on it, so I'm still on it.
No, you're not. No, you wouldn't get away with that one. No, you're not. And just to remind you, you have 15, just about minutes left.
Well, I did my share.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I agree.
Mr. Speaker, I was just saying that those are things the SPS should contain as well. They should have mentioned them. And I think the government needs to consider those type of things. Yeah, you know. If you had put it here, you would have been eased up by then. Mr. Speaker, I think that, like I said in the beginning, this is quite an ambitious goal that the Premier has set out to do. I hope he's successful in it. I'm not optimistic for him. With the amount of struggles they're all going to have in getting policies implemented. I've been there. Don't tell me that it changed that quickly. So, Mr. Speaker, I shall keep a close eye, and I shall remind them of this day of infamy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister of Finance.
I shall be brief, sir, but thank you. Mr. Speaker, thanks for the opportunity. My contribution to the debate this evening is really limited to trying to address, I think, a statement that the leader of the opposition made in his contribution to debate. But just to really explain to members, what I understood he was saying and how I felt personally that the statement was not strictly correct. But in his contribution, in speaking about the 2018 surplus of 69 some odd million, I believe that he then tried to say or suggested that it was not really a true surplus, because when you take away the capital spend and the loan repayments, it really takes it down into a very significant deficit. And I'm paraphrasing here, Mr. Speaker, but the truth of the matter is that those repayments, loan repayments and cash flows, don't really affect your surplus for any period. They don't figure into the equation in calculating what your surplus is. Mr. Speaker, the best way I can explain it to you is that the government statements are prepared on an accrual basis, so that revenues are recognized when they're earned, expenses are recognized when they are incurred, not when they are paid. Similarly, cash payments in and out for, to repay a loan is an exchange of one asset, giving up one asset to settle a liability or an obligation, which are balance sheet items. Similarly, when you spend money on capital items, you are giving up cash in order to acquire another asset. And so it doesn't affect in any way the operating statement. It does come from your revenue, and no question about it. And what I wanted to suggest to the leader of the opposition and to other members of the House too, and even the wider public who might be looking at this statement, you look at page 30 of the SPS, which is laid out quite there's a statement of cash flows, which shows all the projected cash revenues, all the projected cash expenses, and coming down to a net figure, which shows that from those operations, we are forecasting a surplus there of about, surplus in cash, cash being generated from operating activities of about $130 million. Now, the rest of the statement shows you how that $130 million gets used, okay? We have next, if you look at the page there, then we talk about the cash flows from investing activities. That is where you show your purchases of capital items like your fixed assets, your new buildings, property, plant, and equipment, your proceeds from any loans or investment, any dividends received, and also the equity injections into the public authorities. That then leaves you with your financing activities, which are your loan repayments, any new borrowings, and any loan repayments. So those are the three elements that go up to make up your cash flows. And what this statement does show that, for the year, we are projecting an increase of about $10 million in 2018 for cash, at which point we should end up with $380 million as cash at the end of 2018. So I thought that it was important for us just to make that clear and invite members specifically to look at that page 30 of the SPS, which lays it out quite nicely there, what the true cash flows are projected to be. And Mr. Speaker, please beg your indulgence also too to just thank everyone personally for the kind comments today with regard to my delivery of the SPS. Found it very encouraging. Very appreciative of the kind words that were expressed. I think I must at this point, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, acknowledge the good work of the people in the ministry who worked tirelessly over the last several weeks to get us to this point, to make us able to deliver the SPS. Members will know that, the financial secretary lost his mum last week, and that threw a wrinkle into things. The issue we had on Sunday with the fiber optic cable being cut also presented challenges and difficulties, but the team really rose to the occasion and were able to get it all completed for us. And I really want to publicly acknowledge their efforts and say from me and from us a very heartfelt thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, then I'd call on the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank all members for their contributions to the debate on the strategic policy statement and the motion in particular, and to the overview which I was able to deliver on behalf of the government. We have taken note of what has been said, Mr. Speaker, and that will continue to inform the process as we move through the next stage to the budget delivery, and we're aiming for the 13th of October with regard to that. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to the debate from the other side, I was struck, particularly after the contributions of the Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, at how fundamentally different their approach is to the business of government, and in particular, the issue of the preparation of a budget, to the views and the principles on which this administration and the one which preceded it operate. Madam Speaker, other members on the other side also spoke about priorities, and over again we heard the anthem that education must be a top priority. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sorry, habits die hard. Mr. Speaker, to take that view with respect to the preparation of the budget and the planning of the fiscal policies for a government is to not understand the basics of economics. Now, in fairness to him, the Leader of the Opposition said he didn't know anything about economics. So perhaps, Madam Speaker, that explains why he would take the view that in the preparation of the budget, the first priority ought to be education. I'm not sure how I explain the fact that the Deputy Leader of the Opposition also takes that particular view. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that without revenue, we can wish all we want for all of these very important things for our people and for our country. I listened carefully to the contributions of every member from the opposition, and I heard nary one single solitary word or suggestion about how the government could increase its revenues. For without revenues, the very long shopping list that the members recited, none of it is possible. I say that by way of preamble, Mr. Speaker, to point out that the critical and most important priority of any government has got to be your economy. For without a buoyant economy, nothing else is possible. Without a buoyant economy, we do not have jobs. And all of the issues that we are aware of and which members of the opposition were at pains to point out about our people struggling to get employment and to get good employment. None of that is possible if you do not have an economy which supports the job creation. None of it is possible without a strong economy. And so, Mr. Speaker, because this administration, as did the one that preceded it, understands how critically important the economy is, we make provision to support the key industries which allow the economic engine of this country to run smoothly and efficiently. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, when I hear the complaints about the money you're spending on tourism, I say to myself, so how do you expect us to build the schools and to pay teachers more if the revenue sources that we need to provide the basis to do those things are not supported, are not encouraged, are not promoted? Mr. Speaker, there's an old saying that any fool can spend money. That's the easy bit. But it takes thought, Mr. Speaker. It takes thought to figure out how you find the means, how you find the money to spend in the first place. I heard some criticisms about the money spent on Cayman Airways. Again, a fundamental difference in view and approach between the government and those who make up the opposition. Cayman Airways, as far as we view it, is a critical tool for our tourism product. Going into new gateways, bringing increased business to Cayman, not to mention the sense of national pride that it gives to us and the impression it gives to the rest of the world about the success story that the Cayman Islands is. There were some on the other side, and I didn't make notes, who did acknowledge, in fairness, did acknowledge that without Cayman Airways, we would be held at ransom by foreign airlines, and many of the things that we seek to do in terms of growing the tourism numbers in Cayman would not be possible. So, Mr. Speaker, this administration thinks not just about, in terms of allocation of on decision-making with respect to priorities, not about what just are the critical needs and amenities that are necessary for the continued development and promotion of our people, but we have to think of how we are going to continue to be able to fund these things. And so, to criticize the fact that the government says the economy is the first priority is to not, or to indicate that the opposition do not understand what actually makes the engine of the economy work. And all of the great things that they want, most of which we agree with, would not be possible if we didn't support tourism, didn't support financial services, didn't do the things that are necessary to create investor confidence, like good, solid, balanced budgets. I heard the member from East End suggesting that we could go to compliance just to make sure that we get all the money that he thinks we need for education. We go to compliance, and we get back into that downward spiral from which we have just recovered. And it is important, Mr. Speaker, that this House and the broader public understand that that is the sort of thinking that distinguishes the government from the opposition. The member from East End will always be a good opposition member, and long may he remain there. But Lord help us, were he to be put in charge of the finances of this country. Mr. Speaker, we all, and no one should doubt my passion about education, understand how critical it is. And there is no question that we are going to give education every penny that we can possibly afford that it needs. We have pledged $18.6 million in additional operational expenditure over and above the current numbers over the course of this SPS. We have pledged a further $56 million in capital over the course of that period. So no one should doubt how sincere we are about supporting the Minister of Education and her vision and the work of the Ministry and the Department of Education to give our people, our young people in particular, the best possible opportunities that we can to grow, to succeed, to learn, and to take their places as good, solid citizens in this country in time to come. But education is not and cannot be considered in sheer isolation. The whole country has to work, from healthcare to salaries for civil servants, to the national security needs, to the discrete district needs and wants. For Mr. Speaker, you and I have been here long enough to understand that when all of this rhetoric has faded from the speakers and from the headlines, those same members will be hammering on the doors and on the phones to ministers saying, I need this done for my district. I need this done. What do you mean you gave the money to education? I need that for my district. We heard some of it today. That's the way the system is. So I simply want the House, Mr. Speaker, and the broader listening public to understand that while I do not doubt for one moment the sincerity of every member who spoke on the other side about wanting to give education a top priority, they do not want that any more than do the members on this side. But unlike the members on this side, they have no responsibility to find any funding or to make decisions about priorities. That is the constitutional remit of the government. And we, Mr. Speaker, are the government for the time being. So, Mr. Speaker, having, I hope, explained our approach to the development of priorities, I should tell this House something that perhaps others who are more cagey than I would not about this process. The government sat down, used the Progressives Manifesto, the manifesto of the CDP, and the individual manifestos or position papers of the independent members of the coalition. We invited all members of the opposition to come and have a session with the cabinet and to make their presentations. And they all did, and they all did very good jobs. Some of them even took the time and trouble to put it in writing so that we have it there. And government considered all of those things over the course of the past month, 6 weeks. And we sat down then and wrote out our list of government priorities in some considerable detail. We then submitted that to the chief officers and CFOs and said, here are the government's priorities. Please cost them and give them back to us. Mr. Speaker, you see these numbers that are here, as big as they are. The initial submissions were $689 million over that. So the government had to sit down again over many days and decide, well, yes, these are all priorities, but what are the priorities of the priorities? And how much can we afford? Because, Mr. Speaker, unlike the thinking of the member from East End, the government knows that we have to adopt a sensible approach to budgeting. We simply can't get everything that everybody wants. No. We have to continue to produce solid surpluses. We continue with our our policy of no new borrowing, save to the extent we have to refinance the bond. And we were determined not to increase fees and taxes and thus create a greater burden on the people of this country and push the cost of living up. I hear the Deputy Leader of the Opposition constantly referring to the high cost of living. This is the last administration was the only one that I can ever recall since I have been here in almost 17 years that never increased fees and taxes but actually went the other way. It is difficult even when government does that, that is, reduces fees and taxes, to push down the cost of living because in most instances, given the indirect system of taxation that we have and no price controls, we can't determine what merchants charge for products. But one thing is certain, that the converse is true, that the moment government increases any fee or tax or duty, you can believe that is going to be passed on instantaneously to the consumer. And so the government is very conscious of these things and the unique nature of the system that we have in Cayman. And we have done in the past 4 years, and we are doing again this time, every single thing we can possibly do to help keep down, if not push down, the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, I do hope that when we come to the budget and the throne speech, that we will hear more from the opposition than just complaints about and doom and gloom in some instances about the economic prospects of this country, but that we will have some concrete proposals about how we can continue to increase government revenue and how we can actually lower or contain the cost of living. For those are the things that matter most to our people. And Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I lived a long time in the opposition. Any opposition who simply agrees with the government is not doing its job. That, I believe, the system is designed that way. But an opposition must be able to do more than whine and complain and criticize if it seeks to position itself as the government in waiting. For when you are in government is when you are called upon to make the real decisions that affect the future of the country. And the critical decisions such as those that we have taken and will shortly take with respect to the financial fortunes of the country and the impact of policy decisions on the people we are sworn to represent. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is, The question is, be it now therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly approves the policy priorities, aggregate financial targets, and financial allocations set out in the strategic policy statement with respect to the 2018 and 2019 financial years as the indicative parameters on which the budgets for the 2018 and 2019 financial years will be developed. All those in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Government motion number 1 of 2017 is duly passed.
Mr. Speaker, could I have a division, please?
Clerk, a division.
Honorable Alden McLaughlin,
Aye.
Honorable Moses Kirkconnell,
Aye.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly,
Aye.
Honorable Dwayne Seymour,
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Aye.
Honorable Joseph Hugh,
Aye.
Honorable Tara Rivers,
Aye.
Honorable Barney Bush, Captain Eugene Ebanks,
Aye.
Miss Barbara Connolly,
Aye.
Mr. David White,
Aye.
Mr. Austin Harris,
Aye.
Honorable Ezra Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alvis Aku,
After all that, aye.
Mr. Kenneth Bryan,
Aye.
Mr. Anthony Eden, Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Aye.
Mr. Arden McLean.
The results, 17 ayes. One abstention.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't abstain. I was not in the chamber when the division was called because I was on an overseas call, telephone call. I did not abstain. I cannot vote.
Let me correct that, and that should satisfy the member from East End. 17 ayes and one absent. One absent. All right, no big thing is done. The motion is carried. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I wish to thank all members for cooperating and working late to finish the SPS motion today. And I move the adjournment of this Honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning when we will take private members' motions.
Question is that this Honorable House stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Before we leave, we do have devotions at 9:25, and all members are welcome to be there. 9:25 for 15 minutes.